Hola gente,
Okay,
¿cómo están? Welcome a otro encuentro con el grupo Grite. Nuevamente tenemos un invitado de lujo, no solamente a Pablo Martínez Burquet, participando en la conversación y ayudándonos con la traducción, sino que el invitado que tenemos hoy es alguien que, como Pablo comentaba antes de comenzar la grabación, está en el ADN de Estados Unidos y de Argentina. ¿Le suena de algo la serie El Increíble Hulk? ¿Le suena de algo la serie El Hombre Biónico, La Mujer Biónica? Una pequeña serie de ciencia ficción y terror de los años 80 llamado Invasión Extraterrestre, como se la conoció acá. ¿Suena de algo esos nombres? Pues acá tenemos la persona que las guionó, dirigió algunos capítulos y sobre todo creó todas esas series, además de muchas otras, y además de trabajar como director en varias películas, para televisión y para cine. Tenemos el honor enorme de recibir a Kenneth Johnson. Welcome.
Um,
much. I'm
we,
so happy to be here.
all right. It is a true honor to welcome you to the Grupo Grite. Your work, as Fernando said, it's not only shape and landscape. The science fiction television is part of our DNA of the Americas, and particularly in the Argentina. Um, is an indelible mark on the cultural imagination of multiple generations, from the Bionic Woman, Jamie Somers, to be alien invasion, invasión extraterrestre, as we call it over here. Your stories have consistently blended genre with gravitas, spectacle with soul. We are thrilled to have the chance to explore your creative journey, your vision, and the legacy of your storytelling. So, without further ado, let's kick off by asking what first drew you to storytelling, and more specifically, to the realm of speculative fiction?
Thanks you very much again for letting me be here with you. I never thought that I would become somebody that was so associated with science fiction myself. I liked reading it when I was a kid, but I read a lot of things. I think science fiction always, even as a child, appealed to me because it was outside the norm. It was something that was larger than life. I could see many stories and movies and in books and television and everything about real life around me, but science fiction was like mythology. It was like you could go to places that no one had been to before, or you could take characters that were somewhat larger than life, that were demigods, even like Hercules was a demigod, half man, half god, right? Bionic Woman, $6 million man, similar, you know. And I liked that I was sort of working in a world of mythological people, even when I was working in the real world. And the hardest part about writing for science fiction or speculative writing is to make it believable to an audience. So an audience an audience will only buy so much. They will only believe so much, you know. And when you tell them there is a Superman, okay, that's from a comic book that everybody knows and it's a classic. But when you're talking about Bionic Woman, for example, they know there are real people there. And what we had to do was to try to make it believable that those real people could have extra parts that were cybernetic organisms, cyborgs.
You were ahead of the age for more than 40 years, isn't it?
Yes, I got many letters when I was doing the bionic shows from amputees, from children who had lost arms and legs, and they wanted to know where could they get them, because they see them there on Jamie and on Steve Austin,
Yeah,
and
of course.
I always took time to write back and say, we're not there yet, that this is a story, but by the time you grow up, you may very well be a doctor, a scientist who helps to figure out and make it happen. And now, of course, 50 years later, that has happened. And there are bionic arms and hands, and it's astonishing, And with the Hulk, I didn't like shows that were comic book shows. I just never liked spandex and primary colors. They're not in the real world. And when I was offered the opportunity after the bionic success to do one of the Marvel comic superheroes that Universal had just bought, I didn't want to do any, because suddenly I was becoming the sci-fi guy, and I wanted to have a bigger career as a writer and director. But I was reading Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, and so I got the idea of, I had in my head Jean Valjean, Javert, Inspector Javert pursuing him, and so I liked the idea of the fugitive kind of thing, and a little bit of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where the wonderful Dr. Jekyll turns into the, terrible Mr. Hyde. And I thought to combine little Victor Hugo, a little Robert Louis Stevenson, Jekyll and Hyde, and Incredible Hulk. I thought, okay, I think I can do that, if they leave me alone, and if I can make it an adult show. I didn't want to do a comic book show or a cartoon show. So I went to Universal and I said, this way, my way, I will do it. Otherwise, no, And they said, sure, go ahead. And I created it. And the challenge was, how do you make a big green guy believable to an audience in the real world? And that's what I tried to do. I tried to put a lot of scientific aspects into it. I researched a lot because I was told once by a famous gentleman, he said, when you're telling a lie, telling a story, put as much truth in it as you can, because that way you will lead the audience along. Do you believe this? Oh, yeah. Well, you heard about this, didn't you? Oh, yeah, yeah. What about this? And they go, well, I have not heard of that, but that makes sense. So it's logical. It needs to be logical. And that's what I've tried to do always in all of my shows. And when I did V, I needed an alien race, but I wanted it to be realistic. And so I realized that until 65 million years ago, the reptiles ruled. And then, unfortunately, a comet or a meteor hit and made a global warming, and the reptiles died off. But had they not, it's very likely that we could have developed, or a race could have developed, that was like the reptiles, but becoming biped and like that, so that I could make that logical jump for an audience to say, oh yeah, I'll believe there's an alien race, because I couldn't really hire any reptile actors. All the actors were human, So I had to make it as real as I possibly could. And with the Hulk, in one of the very early shows, I said to Universal, I want to take him to New York. and run him through Times Square. And the Universal said, why? And I said, because not only is it a great visual, but Times Square is known around the world as real, as being a real place. And now if we have Lou Ferrigno running through it and all, suddenly the story becomes, oh, well, wow, it's real. So that's what I've always strived to do in my work in speculative fiction, is to try to follow the rules that I establish for myself, and follow what the classic writers, H.G. Wells and Orwell and so many wonderful writers before me, Conan Doyle with Sherlock, so I've always tried to emulate their work, and also respect the audience's intelligence, and not expect them to just accept something, because that's why I get lost in the Marvel universe. There's just too many people, too many powers, too many things going on. But anyway, that's a long-winded answer. I apologize, but
no, but it's quite interesting because you are talking about the craftsman, the craft of your own vision about this situation of Steve Austin, the astronaut, or Jamie Summers, or Oscar Goldman. As you can see, I have not to make any kind of research to remember the name.
That's right. No, Oscar Goldman. Steve, you can't go in there, pal. Oscar, I don't want to go in. Yes, they were great friends. We were all great friends while we were doing the shows.
I have to say, on behalf of my third brother, Sebastian, that the Bionic Man is his all-time favorite TV series. So
that's great.
He's gonna get crazy when I tell him that I was talking with you.
Sebastian, you have a great brother. I'm lucky to be here with him. You respect him and love him.
Thank you very much indeed. So you mentioned that, but I would like to go a little to the bone, because you said that your literary influences like Victor Hugo, Sinclair Lewis,
Cervantes, yes, all the classics. I loved reading the classics. Jules Verne, of course, was one of the. I think the first time I stayed up all night to read a book, it was Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne.
It's my favorite. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, go ahead.
No. It's good. It's going back. It's a dialogue, so it's good. We would like to if you could elaborate a little more about this work, inform your thematics choices, particularly to focus on moral complexity and social allegories that you use to punch in every. I remember when Dr. David Bronner is hitchhiking at the end of every chapter, is really in the sunset or something like that, with
walking off alone, the lonely man.
Yes, the lonely man, and having a monster inside, and trying to solve things with some kind of moral predicament. And this is a really, really interesting, as I say it as a horror genre, as a writer. The soul, you can see the soul, you can see the predicament your characters were facing, one being kind of monster or a monster, and the other kind of monster because they have legs or
Exactly. Well, when I created the Hulk, I realized what the story was about. I'm always not so much thinking about what is the plot, but what is it about? What's it about underneath? And the Incredible Hulk was about self-control, was about trying to restore self-control. It was also based on Greek tragedy, which I read a lot of when I was in college and theater school. In Greek tragedy, the hero almost always has brought the curse down upon himself. Something that he did, Oedipus or whatever, has caused this curse to be brought down upon him. And he then has to figure out how to deal with it. And what we tried to do in the episodic series of The Incredible Hulk was we'd say, okay, well, the people that Banner meets as he's on his quest to cure himself should have their own demons inside that they are struggling with. And in some cases, so sometimes we do a show that was about obsession. Someone was obsessed with something, or about greed, about how people react, reacted to greed, or drugs, of course, or alcohol, or those are the obvious ones. But it was to try to touch on the turmoil, the enemy within, the enemy inside the different characters. And that, to me, is what makes a three-dimensional character, makes them more believable and realistic. And humanism has always been very, very important to me. And the concept of being aware of, no man is an island, and so every man's death affects me because I'm engaged with mankind. And I wanted to try to make people think about those things all the way along. I was also very careful on the Bionic shows and the Hulk also, none of the Bionic people ever hit anybody with a fist. Jamie Summers never hit anybody. She would pull the rug out from under them. She would shove them. Even on the Hulk, Lou Ferrigno never threw a punch at any person, And people would say, oh, it's such a violent show. Well, it was violent because he was breaking through walls and stuff and throwing people aside. But it was always that. It was never that, And to me, that was a very important element of those characters that were larger than life, that were stronger than life. But to see someone that's working through that turmoil inside themselves. And that's what Banner was doing, because he was bereft and so frustrated with what he had done to himself, and that it would make him angry. And then you have to be careful, don't get angry, So it's but to try to keep it on a level always that the adults that were watching would understand what I was trying to get across, the sense of humanism, the sense of being aware of my fellow creatures on the planet, but do it without, standing up and preaching about it, but just showing it in the context of stories. But I've only ever written anything that I thought I would like to see. That's where I come from. And my moral compass has just been developed over the years. And my wife, Susie, is the same. She is my North Star. She is the one that is always the most reliably there, saying, no, that's too much, and or that's too little, or, oh, I love this. But she's my first and always best critic and confidant. Anyway, that's what I've tried to do in my work, and to use the opportunities when you have a successful show. It's like Peter Parker, with great power comes great
responsibility.
Responsibilities.
That responsibility. Yes, exactly. And I realized when the shows begin to get popular and you begin to hear, oh, it's so wonderful and your work is so brilliant and yada yada yada, it's easy to get lost in the fame. And Bill Bixby and I used to talk about fame because there are many schools that you can go to learn to be a good actor, director, writer. Bill went to Berkeley. I was at Carnegie Mellon University. The drama department there was theater. It was real, and we worked Stanislavski, and it was all about the character and building and creating the character. So that's what I've always tried to remember and to hang on to whenever I'm creating a show. And there's many things that I have written that never got made, but the ones that did get made and that were particularly popular, it's so rewarding when people are saying, I became a doctor because I so watched David Banner. I became a teacher because Jamie Summers was a teacher, and with V, I wanted to create a spectrum of characters where everybody in the audience would be able to say, oh, I think I'm this one, or I think I'm that one. Oh, I might be that one. Ooh, but I might be, And I wanted to have characters always that audiences could identify with. And I knew the kids would come along. I always was very successful at having what the industry calls four-quadrant hit. A four-quadrant hit. That means you get the adults, men, you get the adult women, you get the teens, and you get the kids.
Yeah.
That's all four, And my audience of those four, the largest section of audience has been adult women. And in all of my work, from Bionic Woman through the Hulk, through V, through Alien Nation, through everything that I've done, adult women are the ones that like my shows the most. And it's not because I set out to say, well, what would a woman like? I just wrote what I would like and what I felt was important to say. And I also really like strong women. And I don't think there's enough of them in the movies. And so that's sort of the whole thing. Sorry, exhausting.
No, you mentioned it almost answered my next question. Because your academic background was in broadcasting and filming in the Carnegie Mellon, but you could
let me say interesting though. At Carnegie Mellon, it was a theater school. Yeah. There was no film, there was no television. It was pure theater, as Stanislavski. Yes. Now, I was very lucky because in the first week of my freshman year, I met a guy who was a senior, not in the drama department. He was in the business school. Oh, yeah. And he was a big man on campus. He ran the school newspaper and a bunch of other things. And he also ran the Film Arts Society. And every Thursday, he would screen a classic of international cinema. And for $3, you got to see 14 movies on Thursdays, And every other one was not English speaking. And I had always been a movie fan, but my friend Bill, his name was, introduced me to the cinema, And Bill went on to create the Telluride Film Festival, incidentally, and for 35 years ran it. But when he graduated that year, I took over the Film Society. And I ended up running it for 4 years and putting myself through school, setting up other film societies. And so I had seen 400 or 500 of the best movies, in the world. Satyajit Ray out of India and everybody. And so I had the great theater training on the one hand from Carnegie, and I had this whole Cinematheque kind of training that Francois Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard were getting into Paris Cinematheque at the same time I was. And so that's where the meld came out of it. And I realized um, that I really wanted to be in film, because when you have a theatrical performance, it can be brilliant, and we've all seen live performances that just take your breath away, and they're wonderful. But when the curtain closes, it's gone. It's only a memory. And I
Indeed.
realized that with film, once you've got it, then you've got it forever. I mean, my dear friend Bill Bixby died 15 years ago, but
Yes,
people
indeed.
still remember him alive and well, and being a good human being every day, on television around the world. And so that's why I gravitated to that. But I brought along all of my theatrical and character building training to help infuse, inform, inspire my writing.
Great answer. I'm just like a joke, but not so far a joke. I used to say that I am a method writer, like an actor of the method, because I put myself inside so deep in the
Right.
situation, with music, with all stuff around me, that, or even just moving like some of the horror characters in front of the mirror, that
Right.
is very enlightening what you say about Stanislavski. Actually, I got theater subject in Salamanca, but it was great. The Greek tragedies was great. So we have our friends over here. We are all scholars, so they have a lot of questions.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
fire away, my dear friend Fernando.
Quisiera saltar, Pablo, si me permitís, para relacionar un poco con lo que veníamos hablando con respecto a The Incredible Hulk, y su idea de
Sí,
no, su desinterés en hacer un comic book. La pregunta sería, para los que vimos la serie, sabemos que Banner pasa en todos los capítulos de pueblo en pueblo. Muchos de ellos tienen problemas económicos severos, algunos están al borde de desaparecer, otros tienen problemas de criminalidad. Y es una época también en que Estados Unidos tiene problemas en sus pequeños pueblos. Quisiera saber si esto fue algo intencional, esto fue una crítica hacia el estado del momento o simplemente fue por una cuestión dramática.
all right. Fernando said that one of the most compelling aspect of the Incredible Hulk, it is a rather critical portrayal of the 70s and the 80s in America. Leaving behind the big cities, David Banner travels wander through small towns plagued with economic harsh times.
Yes.
What these are social critique or just an intentional part of the show design?
Well, I realized one of the difficulties of doing The Incredible Hulk was that we had no standing sets at the studio. You're doing the Bionic shows, there was an Oscar Goldman's office, there was Jamie Summers' coach house, there was interiors that would be standing, you could always place scenes in there. When we were doing the Hulk, we had no standing sets. And we were constantly going off the lot, as we say, off the Universal lot, to film in the areas around Los Angeles. And also many times my producer friend Jim Parriott, who was with me for several years at the beginning on the Hulk and it's still a dear friend, we would walk around the sound stages at Universal, peeking in to see where there was a set that somebody else had built for something else that we could binned around and used for one of our things, you know. So it looked like Bill was traveling all the time, but he was always within about 30 miles of Los Angeles for the most part. And a lot of it were on sets that we had stolen from some other show to use. But what we tried to do on the shows were focus on character. You know, occasionally we were able to, I think, make comments on society and on the life in our country at the time. But for the most part, that was just collateral to what we were really focusing on, which was always the characters themselves that Banner got involved with. That's what intrigued us the most. So we always tried to build every episode around who could he meet and how was that person either helpful to him, because there were basically two kinds of Hulk episodes. One where he was on the road traveling to get from here to there and met somebody in the middle that was in deep trouble and he had to help sort it out and then go with it over his shoulder and walk off into the night, you know. The other type of show was the one where he had gotten to that person and was trying to see how that person could help him, you know, get rid of this thing through hypnosis or drugs or various things to how can I make this go away? It's funny, the whole premise of the show was to make the show come to an end, you know, which we never got to because they canceled it out of the blue, crazy. And so we never had a chance to turn it around and bring it all together. But our interest was always primarily character driven and creating characters that would allow us to have our hero interact and be involved with them.
I can help myself. What would you proper ending of the show?
I don't know. I knew I wanted it to. I felt that it would had to be satisfying for the audience that had followed it for so long, and some things should be resolved with McGee and all. But because it was canceled out of the blue, we never really got deep into it, and I've never gone back to try to figure it out because I can't do anything with it anyway. Marvel and Universal own it, you know. So and besides, the Hulk is still alive and well in you know, every other Marvel movie.
All
Anyway,
right.
next question.
Yeah. Who's going next?
Yo quisiera entonces,
Fernando.
siguiendo el orden de las preguntas, Pablo, su primera experiencia fue trabajar con Vincent Price en An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe. Hermoso, tienen que ver a Vincent Price recitando Poe. Belleza. ¿Cómo fue trabajar con Vincent Price y los productores Samuel Arkoff y James Nicholson?
Fernando referred to your work together with my patron saint, my own patron
Vincent.
saint,
Yeah.
Vincent Price, and directing Vincent Price on the evening with Edgar Allan Poe, my saint of the saints, who was responsible for selecting the stories recited in the special, and the Sphinx is no, I'm yes.
I get it. Let me, because I heard Sam Arkoff go by. Yeah, I know. What happened was I was doing a live talk show in the East Coast, and Vincent came in as a guest on the show. That's how we met. Whenever I had a wonderful opportunity with somebody like Vincent, and who was known for, of course, for his work in Poe and the horror movies. That was after he had already been a movie star. You know, when I was born, the day I was born, Vincent was on the back lot at 20th Century Fox doing the Song of Bernadette. You know, I mean, it was like, and so he was an idol of mine and a wonderful actor. Anyway, he was on this TV show, and I asked him to read a little bit of The Telltale Heart as well as part of his being on the show. And I just put him at a podium, and we turned the lights down, and there was an audience there, and he began reading Edgar Allan Poe's story. And it was electrifying. I mean, he was so amazing. So when I first came to California a couple of years later, I called him up, and I said, how about we do a 1-hour show where you don't just read, but enact 4 of the stories. And of course, he's an actor. An hour of me, of course, you know, and a dear guy. He took me into his home with his daughter, his wife Mary, and their daughter Victoria, and I by then I had selected 4 stories that would work in this kind of format, and he said, yes, I absolutely want to do it. He said, I'm under contract to American International Pictures, which had done all of the Edgar Allan Poe stories. And so I had to meet with Sam Arkoff, who was the president of American International. He was a classic Hollywood producer, I want a big cigar, you know, Sam Arkoff, yeah. And rubber monsters, I like rubber monsters, and I like boobs, you know. It was his partner, James Nicholson, was exactly, if the 2 of them were ever done, a movie done about them, James Nicholson would have been done by James Mason. He was that kind of English, very very quiet sort of, yes, I understand. I want to be your friend, Lolita, not your daddy. You know, so James Mason would have been a perfect James Nicholson. For Sam Arkoff, you needed Zero Mostel, you know. It's that kind of big wow. But at any rate, he liked the idea. It wasn't going to cost him that much money. He gave us the money to make. It was only about $100,000, I think. And Vincent and I put together and created and directed, and I directed the piece. And we rehearsed together for a couple of weeks, and it was wonderful, because when we first started rehearsing, I thought, God, this is Vincent Price. He's an actor. You know, I'm a young director. What can I give him? But when we'd start working on it and get into it, and we'd go back and forth, I realized, oh yeah, he's just an actor, you know, and I'm a director, and that's what we do. And that's where it developed from. And he always said afterwards that it was the best piece of work that he had done in Hollywood in 30 years. And he was so proud of it. And we were dear friends all the way to the end of his life together. And but thank you, Fernando, for remembering that. And I want to make sure we have time so that I can show you some of the stuff from Don't Look Under the Bed too. That's how this all began too. So that's what I brought, and that's what I was trying to set up the screen sharing for.
Okay.
¿Quién eligió? Who chose the 4 stories? You?
Yes. I read all of Poe's stories and decided those were good because they were told in the first person. He could really be playing the story, you know. You know, I was the old man in his eye. It was bothering me. It was wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff.
Okay.
Va a seguir Emiliano.
Sí, Emi.
Sí, gracias. Pablo, voy a invertir el orden de 2 preguntas. A finales de los 70 participó de una serie de televisión que se llamó Cliffhangers. Es un proyecto que tenía como objetivo, en cierto modo, revivir los clásicos seriales de la década del 30, 40, pero en formato televisivo. Kenneth Johnson llevó a cabo una historia sobre el conde Drácula, pero ambientada en el mundo contemporáneo. La pregunta sería cómo fue su experiencia con ese proyecto y si le resultó fructífera, perdón, si le resultó fructífero llevar una novela tan paradigmática como Drácula al presente del momento, ¿no? De los 70.
Okay, Emiliano asked that in the late 70s, you were involved in a cliffhanger, a project that sought to revive the spirit of classic serials in a television format. You develop a story about Count Dracula set in contemporary war. What was your experience working on that project? Did you find it fruitful to bring such a paradigmatic novel into the modern setting?
Right. It's when I was a kid in the early days of in the 1950s, on Saturdays they would run the old Republic serials made by the Republic Studio in Hollywood, where I later filmed, and all of the great old movie serials where an audience would get a cliffhanger at the end of every episode so that they would come back next week and buy another ticket and see another movie. That's what the serials were all about. And I saw all of them as a kid over and over again, and I loved them. I think they shaped a lot of my thinking about episodic television because it was similar in many ways. And when I was, and so I'd studied them a lot. I had an opportunity at one point to be working at a television station where they had lots of them, and I went through, just looked at hours and hours of them together. And then in the 78, I think it was, I got a call from Fred Silverman, president of ABC, big fan of my bionic shows. And he asked me, he said, I got an idea. Did you ever see any of the old cliffhangers? And I said, I grew up on them, and so did George Lucas, and so did Steven Spielberg,
Indeed.
And he had the idea of doing a 1-hour television show where there would be 3 different 20-minute chapters of 3 different serials, and I said, you can't afford that. It's going to cost you $1 gazillion. He said, no, Jeff, it would be a great idea. Okay, so I agreed to do it. I originally wrote 5 stories, picked 3 of the stories, and one of them was the contemporary Dracula, because I thought I had never seen a romantic Dracula. I'd certainly seen all of the I never drink wine. We've all seen Bela Lugosi and all of those. But what I was interested in was a man, and we never really got all the way deep into it as I wanted to on the series because it was canceled too soon. But I wanted to see a man who had this curse brought down upon him. It was again the same backstory, but we never got to hear it on the show yet. About a guy who had sacrificed himself so that to save his brother from being a vampire, and he'd become a vampire. And then he was a dangerous guy, and he was drinking blood, and he was killing people. But at the same time, there was a romantic side of it. The stars. I've seen the stars. I've seen the stars a lot because I never get to see the sunshine. And I was very lucky because the actor that I hired to play Michael Nouri came into my office and sat down and was absolutely in character. Good evening, Kenny. It's nice to meet you here. I am just here from Transylvania. Oh, you have a cut on your finger. Here, let me lick it. And so it was a great fun to do and to create, and to be scary, but also to have a humanistic kind of underpinning to it. And I was always sorry we didn't have more time to explore it longer.
Great. You are an amazing impersonator.
Yes,
thank you very much.
It's true. A very great imitator.
I also do a pretty good Steve Austin. You know, I used to say to Lee Majors, Steve, sounds like you're constipated. Yeah, way you talk, you know, can you just talk straight, buddy? You know, but he was from Oklahoma, and that's the way he talked, like that there.
Yes. Although in the series was from Ohio, isn't it?
No, no, he was an
No?
Oklahoma boy.
Okie. He was an
Yeah,
Okie, yes.
he was an
Oh,
Okie. Yeah,
okay. I
yeah.
remember from Ohio, but well, maybe it's my mistake. Okay, Amy, go ahead.
Sí, sí, gracias, Pablo. Durante su carrera trabajó en muchas ocasiones con personajes previamente creados, como por ejemplo, bueno, los ya mencionados, ¿no? Hulk, Drácula, Sherlock Holmes, incluso, y hasta podemos también mencionar a Short Circuit en la segunda parte de esa franquicia. La pregunta sería, desde su perspectiva como escritor, realizador de un proyecto, ¿qué ventajas tiene para usted trabajar sobre personajes ya creados y si difiere este proceso creativo en comparación a crear personajes propios o completamente nuevos?
All right. Fernando said that from your perspective as a writer and director, what are the advantages of working with pre-existing characters such as the Hulk, Sherlock Holmes, Dracula, or Short Circuit, and how
Short Circuit.
does, yes, your creative process differ when developing an entirely original character?
Well, it's the Sherlock Holmes was. I had been reading all of Conan Doyle's work, and I was just captivated by the character of Sherlock, and I thought, and I had the thought of, okay, suppose after Moriarty has died, he begins to get lose the sense of life, and he's just sinking into cocaine deeper and deeper, and what if my friend Steve Cannell, who created the Rockford Files and the A-Team and lots and lots of shows, Steve Cannell, Steve's license plate on his car was "What if?" What if, you know? And I so I guess I had that in my head because I'm reading Sherlock Holmes, and one night I thought, what if he decided to, being a master chemist, he had and being around people like H.G. Wells, who was his contemporary. What if he had read H.G. Wells' Time Machine and thought, oh, that's a great idea, but it's science fiction. I could never do that, but I am a master chemist. And maybe I can find a way to entomb myself to wake up and solve the new mysteries. You know, that's what sort of intrigued me. What I liked about it was that when he wakes up 100 years after he's gone to sleep, he's in a new century, and he's still the same. I wanted exactly the same Sherlock character. I didn't want to mess with the character because Conan Doyle's character was so wonderful. But I wanted to bring that character, the same egocentric, eccentric, egotistical, cocaine-addicted, sexist genius into the 21st century. But now that he's 100 years later, he's 100 years out of sync, you know. So some of his brilliant deductions are either really wrong or really dangerous, you know. And I realized that it could be a sort of a combination of a comedy, sort of a romantic comedy, with a female doctor, a female, really, you know. It's like, it's great, you know, and be able to play off of that, and it just was an obvious way to really have fun with the character. And that's where it came from. And it was great to be able to make certain that I stuck to the words that Conan Doyle wrote. Easily half of the dialogue that he speaks in my story, in my movie, and later in the book that I wrote of it, turned it into a novel. They're really right out of the Conan Doyle canon, you know, and it's fun when you can take a character and suddenly do something with him that nobody else has done. That's really, you know, a lot of fun to do. And again, with Dracula, everyone comes with a pre-existing idea of what Dracula is, but then when you twist it a little bit and take it into a slightly different direction, that it's also still logical and believable, and the adult audience will embrace you. Then, you know, it's great fun to be able to do that.
Excellent, excellent. Guys,
Bien,
who's coming?
aparte de ser un brillante creador de series de televisión, también es director de películas y películas para televisión. Una de sus obras más redondas, más perfectas, es Don't Look Under the Bed, una película hecha para Disney, una película para televisión, un telefilm, y es una obra, le pido a la gente que la vean, es realmente un masterpiece, blending humor, horror and comedy. It's perfect, just achievable, es perfecta, es hermosa, beautiful. ¿Qué directrices le dio Disney al momento de poner humor, controlar el terror? ¿Qué directrices o límites le puso Disney?
Okay. One of your masterpiece is, without any kind of doubt, Don't Look Under the Bed, where you masterfully blends horror, children's cinema, and comedy. Fernando would like to know what limitations or boundaries or guidelines did Disney impose regarding the horror elements during the production, considering that is a child or younger?
Yes. Well, I had. Thank you for all the nice things, Fernando, that you say, and I'm glad because it'll give me a chance to show you a little bit of what we did and how it happened and how I did the filming. If you guys are still okay to do that.
Go ahead.
Yes, of course.
Okay. But I had done a very successful movie for Disney Channel to help out a friend. I got a call from Suzanne DePass. She was the executive producer of a movie that they were about to start called Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century, science fiction piece for the Disney Channel. She called me in a panic. She said, I'm 2 weeks into the prep. I'm about to start filming. I have a director that doesn't know what he's doing. Can you get on a plane? And so I went to up there with her so that I've been wanting to work with her for a long time. And Xenon proved to be a really huge hit for the Disney Channel, and they were ecstatic about it. And so, you know, whenever you have a hit show for anybody, then they come back to you and they say, oh, well, we'd like to do another one, you know, which is a good thing. That's the only way we can survive in this business. Usually we call show business is a gypsy business. You know, the gypsies come into the town, they put up this tent and they set their show, and then they pack it up and then they go away to the next town. And so they brought me the script of Don't Look Under the Bed, which I really liked a lot. Except for the ending, which I changed and a little bit. And
director prerogative.
Yeah, you know, I did it with the blessings of the writer, and we worked it out together. And I'll explain it to you when we get there. But let me try to. So at any rate, I was very interested in the idea of blending comedy and horror at the same time. How you do that for a Disney Channel audience where a lot of them are 4 years old, you know? And I said, guys, this is not, you know, and it was It ended up being the first Disney Channel movie that was not G-rated. You know, G-rated is absolutely kiddie time, right?
Yeah.
It was PG rated, PG-13, and there was even a warning on it for audiences. Not some of it not suitable for young children. And they made a point of stating that and all of that, but still they took some heat because a lot of parents said it was a little too scary. You know, it's like, well, did you read the warning? Hello, you know. It was crazy. But one of the problems of doing a show for Disney is that all of the lead characters are 14 years old. And the problem with that is when you're a director, if anybody is under the age of 18, you don't get them for a whole 12-hour, 13, 14-hour day. You know, and the younger they are, the less time you have. With a 14-year-old, you're lucky if you get them for a total of 8 hours, and that includes lunch and breakfast and dinner and class time, and you know, it's a nightmare. And I'd gone through it on Xenon because I was constantly having to use photo doubles and so we were going to shoot in Salt Lake City, Utah. They wanted to go back to Vancouver, which is where we had shot Xenon, and so many things were in. And I said, can't we do it in America and give some Americans jobs for a change? I said, well, Hollywood's too expensive. And we ended up, there was a non-union crew in Salt Lake City, very, very good crew, mostly Hollywood guys that were just not working as union members, you know. And we ended up shooting in Salt Lake City. And when I was planning to cast the two leads, kids out of Los Angeles, because that's where the biggest talent pool is, of course. But there was one girl that came in to read for me for a small role in Salt Lake, because then I'd use locals in Salt Lake so we wouldn't have to spend too much money. But this young girl came in, Erin, and she read for a small part, and I said, this kid is really good. You know, would you go back and read for the lead? And she did, and she just knocked it out of the park. And so I hired her. But then as we were, you know, I was looking at her resume though, and I said, Erin, on your resume it says you're a freshman at Brigham Young University. How old are you? And she said, oh, do I have to tell you? And I said, yes, you have to tell me. And she said, I'm 18. And I went, you know, 18. Oh my God!
You can work around the clock.
Your ass, you know. It's great, you know. And it was, and the beauty of it is she really looks 14. And then when we were going to hire Ty, when the role was not written as a black character. It was just written. And I had a number of white guys came in that read for it, and a couple of black guys too. But he came in and just blew us out of the room. He was so good, and I said, oh my God, this is the kid. Him and Erin together, it's great chemistry. And I said, Ty, how old are you, Ty? And he said, well, I'm 17 and a half. I went, oh God. I said, okay, well, we'll have to deal with it, but we'll deal with it. I said, when do you turn 18? And it turned out that he was going to turn 18 about 2 weeks into the filming. And on that night, we had a big birthday party for him on the set. Happy birthday. And by the way, you're working all night. Because now I got you, you know. And they were terrific together. And let me just see if I can get this up now. And is it? Here it is. Okay. Okay, this is where it began. Now, one of the things that I was trying to decide in filming was how to differentiate the world that Erin and that Ty and Larry and Francis were in from the real world. And one of the things that I realized might be effective is whenever we were in their little part of the world, the picture wouldn't be like this. It would be just a little skewed like that. And I wasn't sure that wouldn't get too crazy if I'm going back all the time. But it ended up working pretty well. And let me see if we got this again. Let me just go back a little bit. Make sure you've got the audio. You hear audio?
Yes.
You have it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This is the first time she sees Larry. Wait a minute. Okay, so we were trying to figure out how are we going to do that?
You can see me?
I thought, well, it could maybe be a visual effect where we run the bus through twice and do something. But you know what I said? I said, Ty, how fast can you run?
Oh.
And that's what's happening. Watch. Run! He's running. Woo! And he just gets out of the way in time. You know, so we did it in the camera on the day, and that's how we got it.
Strange things were happening that day all
then
over
we had to do the
Middleburg.
scene at the swimming pool.
Someone put a little gelatin in the school swimming pool.
Well, now you have no idea. It took about 17 truckloads of Jell-O to fill up the pool. No, that's not what we did. You know, this is a visual effect. I shot what's called the background plate, the real gymnasium up there. And then I had a girl do a headstand for me against a green screen. And then I handed this off to Craig Weiss, who was my visual effects guy. And here's what Craig did. He created our own bowl of Jell-O here, but you see the reflections down here because he set it up so we'd have the light that it would look the same as the pool. And this was at the studios at CBS here. And on the cork right here, he put that in so we'd have a target that he could tie the girl onto who was doing the headstand so that she would bounce in it like that. And then when we put it together, bingo, you know. There you can see the background there for a second. Okay, so now for you. I brought her along. Here she is. She's been in my office. She's been in my office ever since, you know. And she's pretty, you know, and as long as she doesn't look at you, you're okay. But as soon as she starts yeah, well.
Quiet, Annabelle, quiet.
Yeah, and now that was not in the movie. It was not in the script, rather. When just to go back just a pinch. But that moment of that doll's head turning was not in the script. I added a lot of things in the script and as we went along time. But sooner or later, we get to the moment here where the shit has to hit the fan. And the boogeyman has got to come get Darren out from under the bed. This was all done real in this set. It is a set. There was a hole cut in the back behind the bed that we could shine the xenon light through. And then we could also push some liquid nitrogen in there, which is what you're seeing here. When you want smoke that's on the floor or going down, you'll use liquid nitrogen because it's cold and it goes to the bottom. And that's what we're doing. We just turn the light on and we pump the liquid nitrogen in like that. And then I put a camera on a little skateboard under the bed here. And he go. Okay, now, when you're working with a visual effects supervisor, the director will oftentimes say, okay, this is what I want it to look like. I want it to be like this, spectacular, you know? And then the visual effects supervisor says, well, can we do it like a little more like this, you know, to try to get it down and make it manageable. Working with Craig Weiss, it was the first time I had worked with Craig, who had made a deal with me. We had done storyboards on all of the visual effects and sent them out to 5 or 6 visual effect houses to get their bids, how much will cost, you know. $750,000 they came in. This one guy, Craig, called me and said, I will do it for $250,000. I said, no, you won't. You can't do what I want to do. He said, I will write it down and sign it because he had just started this company at CBS, the big television network. to do visual effects there. And they were willing to deficit finance all of his over. So he said, I'll do it. They'll pay the extra. Don't worry. So here's what he did for me. I wanted when she crawled under the bed, I wanted gravity to change. I wanted her to start crawling like this, but by the time she gets under the bed, gravity has changed and she's now hanging like this off of a cliff. And so Craig built this rig at CBS. This is a motion control rig. The camera's up at the top there, and she's going to be climbing up here. And here's it's a motion control shot with an actress in it. Erin has got a hip rig on. She's got she's being held up by the two things here. The place she's crawling over is plexiglass. Right now during rehearsal, it has paper on it so it doesn't get scratched. But we were working out the timing. We were still trying to figure out exactly how the timing would work. My stunt coordinator, John Epstein, is off camera trying to coach her through it. And now the thing starts to go, and she starts climbing up the rope to get to Boogie World and go under the bed. And the camera's going up above her, and she was a little too fast. We had to change the timing a little bit, but that was the rig that Craig built in order to achieve the shot that I wanted to get. And here's the shot that he got right here. This is what it looked like. Now that's what it looked like in the room at the time. The paper's been removed here from the plastic so that we're seeing through to the green screens on the floor and behind her. And as she goes up, we added in the what was under the bed. We had taken photographs of that so that we could add that in. I bought a mattress that was all falling apart that we put and shot that. And then Craig layered that in. And then I needed a threshold for her to go through to end up on the other side, which is what that was, that little moment. And here at the end, she's hanging on. And notice the rock is steady. On the day we shot it in the set, the rock was moving, but Craig even made the rock solid. Here it is again, her crawling, plus the pieces that we added, one layer at a time, going through into the Boogie World and ending up hanging upside down, kicking her feet, and rocks falling to make it even look a little more real. And it was an extraordinary, effect. Here it is in the movie now. Oh, yeah. First, we had to decide what's in Boogie World. Well, I got with Sharon Compton. Sharon was my storyboard and concept artist. And we said, what's under a kid's bed? Well, there'd be a roller skate, there'd be beads, there'd be a fairy's wand from something, maybe a mask from something, And we did some concept art on what it could look like and what could be under the bed. This is looking down on top of it here, where there's this thing over here, an old rocket ship that has a battery in it because we needed to have some electricity. Here's the mask over here. And she's going to discover that her brother Darwin is held prisoner inside this sock over here. It's very handy to have a sock with your 4-year-old or your 7-year-old in it, because then you don't have to have the real 7-year-old in it all the time. You can put a little person in there. And a little more concept art here too. Coming up. Yeah, at one point she's going to come up riding on the little car. She's going to go into this inline skate, and then she's going to see she's underneath here, and what she sees, and pieces of toys are around, and all of this kind of stuff that you'd find under a bed. An old stuffed doll is over here, and up here is where the boogeyman is going to make an entrance. And this was our first concept of the boogeyman, which is pretty dark and scary, as you can see. And later on, she had to get a battery to connect the thing, and his upside down doll, always creepy. And here's the boogeyman dragging Darwin toward the precipice. We decided that there was a void out there, and there were other boogie worlds that other children had, but this was her particular boogie world. But look at the guy. I mean, this is this kind of scary guy. And, I thought, I think that's going to be too dark and scary for Disney. So we ended up going with a more 1700s kind of look, as you saw in the finished movie. and we'll see again in a moment. And this is one of the backgrounds. Again, another high angle. I like these high angles where the boogeyman is dragging him close. And by doing the concept art, we can figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, I know that up here is going to be on the stage where we're filming, and then Craig will have his matte artist create the painting down underneath that we will composite together to get the shot that we need for the movie. And again, a closer look at him with the glowing eyes, just a little too scary for that. For Disney. So we're filming not in a soundstage, but in a warehouse that was 100 feet square, and on two of the quarters of it, we put a green screen. So they're against a green screen here. We picked a green screen instead of a blue screen because her colors were purple. We had Erin's colors were purple in the story, and it's easier to get a good matte off of a green screen as opposed to trying to put purple against blue. That's trickier. But so when we're ever looking and you're seeing this background, that's green screen. But the other direction, like this, is looking into our real set. Now, these were toys that Craig just put up in the foreground here. They were real toys, just the size of toys. But this is the set back here, and this was the other half of the soundstage, which sort of sloped up in the back there. And this was all there. Craig added some bed springs here. I had a couple of real bed springs built into the set, as you'll see.
Here are we.
Very easy to do. All we did was we wrapped the tentacles around her legs, we pulled them off, and then we reversed the film. And so when you see it happening like that,
Your side, you're right, you're not.
this is what it looked like when we reversed the film. But this is the way it was actually shot. We just wrapped them around her legs and pulled them off. You know.
No, this is a peanut butter sandwich.
One of my favorite lines. This is a peanut butter sandwich. This is not the boogeyman. Okay, so I tried to get, again, high angles looking down in, pieces of puzzles, crayons, old, playing cards. This is all the kind of stuff that we envision being on the inside of here. And they go on this little ride on the car to get deeper into Boogie World. And they're never moving, actually. All the stuff that's going on around them and behind them was shot separately. But I worked it all out while I was there in Salt Lake. I had my prop department get a big, like ping pong table, and on the table we put out all kinds of stuff that would you'd find under a bed, and we made a trail through it. And I took my little video camera. I had a little lipstick camera that I could go through and show what I wanted to do. That my editor Dave Strohmeyer could put in the background, and then we got to this point here where we made a big paper bag set. And the paper bag set was only about 20 feet long, and I ran them through it about 4 or 5 times so that I could get close-ups of them and everything, because, as you know, Larry is beginning to change. He's beginning to atrophy and turn into the boogeyman. His eyes are strange. His teeth are getting sharper and longer. And Erin begins to realize that during this little passage here. Again, every time you see them, it's going through. Here's what Craig did with his guys. Here's the same table that I had created up in Salt Lake with all the stuff on it, and here's Craig's $25,000 camera doing a better job, and they just programmed it to go through and get side angles and front angles and rear-facing angles that I could then composite in behind them for the ride. What's next here? Yeah, see now Larry's not looking too good here. I mean, there's some real teeth and fangs and shit going on now, and she's beginning to go, what's going on here? Real inline skate. We didn't get a giant one. This is just a real one. Only it's composited in on top of our set here, and Craig just put it on top of the ladder and jiggled it a little bit, and then got a angle from the top like this. So this is just sitting on a ladder with a green screen around it, so that when he pushes it off, the thing can fall. And but first I had to get Erin out of the shoe. And He's looking. Okay, now on the set, on the day when we were filming it, the shoe was not there because it's not that big. Erin was standing right here on an apple box, and she just steps off. And then Craig put the inline skate in behind her, like so, after she steps out. And then we got the high angle.
Oh, I bit my lip.
We got the high angle coming up here, like the concept art, and you can see it's exactly right. See, Erin is just standing on the stage, but we painted all of this in, and Craig added the shoe falling. And it took a long time to get the angle of the cliff just exactly right. It was tricky. But if you were on the stage, if she kept walking, she just would be walking, you know. But so this was just all painted the stage floor out, and instead, and he didn't paint the real stage floor. This was all done in a computer. But it worked. Okay, now she sees Darwin inside the sock. Actually, that's a little person. But now there's the real Darwin.
Darwin!
You know.
Darwin!
And here we see, oh, look at him coming in. Look how smoothly he moves. Wow. That's because he's riding on a camera dolly. There's a camera dolly back there that we're just pulling him along so he's smooth. And now watch coming down here as he gets off. He's going to beckon you see the rope comes over and lands in his hand? This is, again, a reverse print. When we were on the stage, he had the ropes in his hand and he threw them onto the tree. And then we just reversed the film, and it looks like he's gathering them in. Right there. You know? So simple little thing. And now he's dragging Darwin over to the edge. And you see the costume, of course, is never. And now, remember the head that was in her house that turned to look at her? Here it is. It came from we went to the Salt Lake City Opera Company, and I asked them if they had any big props. And they said, well, yeah, we have some. And I saw this head, and I thought, God, that's fantastic. It would be great on the set. And let's put something in her house that looks like that so that we can see sort of a logical connection to why it's there originally. It worked. And I said, that's not good. That's not good enough. The hero can't save the day because she's got a prop. No, she's got to save the day because it comes from inside her. You know, the prop fails, she's got to find her way out of it herself. And that's how we changed the script at the end before I was going to shoot this scene. And they said, how are you going to handle the ending? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, there's a kiss. And I said, yeah. And they said, well, he's black and she's white. And I said, it's 1999. You know, are you telling me that you can't have a black guy kissing a white girl in 1999? And they said, well, we're not sure how it's going to go over in the South, where I was born. And I said, get the fuck out of here, guys. You know, I really did. I was really, I don't know if I said it that harshly, but pretty close, because I couldn't believe that. And I said, no, he's going to kiss her. And they said, well, could you shoot it different ways? I said, it's a kiss. He's going to kiss her. It's over now. And I shot it, and they left it alone. And but that anyone would have even raised that just made me crazy, because I can't stand that kind of. That they really should be there. And then just fade away. And it was an easy shot to do. So we just backed the camera up while they were still sitting there, and then they got out of the bed, and then I just did a dissolve, and it makes some noise. And bingo. And we're out. You know. But anyway, that's a little inside look at Don't Look Under the Bed. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, yes, a master class of direction and pictures like
Yes.
Hitchcock and
Yeah,
the movie
exactly. Right.
45.
Yeah, the Dutch angle. It's called you know why it's called a Dutch angle? I'd always heard it my whole life out here in Canada. They say, oh, it's a Dutch angle. And I'm thinking D-U-T-C-H, Dutch, right? No. It came from the old German cinematographers that came over from Deutschland. And where they were doing in the 1920s, they were doing Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and all of that strange angles, you know, expressionistic cinema. And so when they came to Hollywood, they go, oh, well, you know what we do? We do a Deutsche angle. So it's Deutsche, not Dutch. You know, but anyway. Well, guys, this has been a fascinating experience. The last questions before we ring off?
Oh,
Un par de cositas muy breves. ¿Recuerda en qué horario se emitió la película y si está este film en DVD, Blu-ray o en streaming?
well, just two little questions. One is, do you remember at what time this movie was shown up the television, at the Disney Channel? It was at late night, in the afternoon, and if there is copies in beyond the platforms that you know, DVDs, VHS, and so on.
No, they never made a DVD of it. They never made a VHS of it. On Xenon, they did do a VHS release. It was also 99. It was just before DVDs really came in. And Xenon never made it even to DVD. This one, they did not. This one, Don't Look Under the Bed, also because they got a lot of negative responses from families who hadn't bothered to read the warning saying some, PG movie, that the Disney Channel felt a little burned by that, and they sort of took it off of their rotation for a while. It was off for a year or two, and then finally they began to put it back on. And but they've never, I don't think, at Disney recognized, although it was very popular, and people like yourselves often comment to me about it and about what a wonderful show it was, and a wonderful teaching tool for children and fear and all. But Disney is a strange place. They can be wonderful people to work with, but also it's sometimes referred to as Mauschwitz, as someplace that's not also wonderful. But this is a movie that I'm very proud of, particularly because of the way we changed the ending, particularly because of the heroine having to find it inside herself, to change the way it ended, and to solve the problem. And I was blessed with having Aaron and Ty, who were just the most fantastic kids when it came to rehearsing. We'd rehearse, and I'd say, okay, that's good, that's enough. And Aaron would say, no, let's just do it one more time, But so they were the best kind of actors to work with, because they were engaged and they wanted to really, make it go. And we did. There was talk in the last year or so of trying to do a sequel, picking up the story, much later now than then. And it was, but we tried it. We had some story meetings with the original writer. He was wonderful, but we couldn't find something that was better than what we'd already done, and it was just trying to catch up, and it never could. And we realized it was we made a wonderful little movie with many sweet moments, a lot of humanism, and wonderful performances. And we said it's better to leave it alone, So that's what we did.
Yeah.
Kenneth, you have Charles Chaplin at your back. You wish ¿Te hubiese gustado hacer más comedias?
Oh
Would you
yes.
like to make more comedies?
Again, that was needle pointed by my daughter Julie years and years ago, because she became a fan of Chaplin. When I was running the Film Society at college in the early '60s, you couldn't find Chaplin movies anywhere because he had taken the rights. He left Hollywood and left the country. But there were private collectors that did have 16 millimeter prints of his work. And so, again, it was my friend Bill Pence, who went on to create Telluride, who introduced me to the silent comedians. I'd only ever seen some of the early cheaper stuff, Max Sennett and the Keystone Cops, that kind of stuff. But I had never seen Chaplin or Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd until I was in college. And I just fell in love with their abilities to tell stories without words. Silent movies in general were such an inspiration to so much of my work, trying to show the story, not just talk it through. So as a director, one of the great things I took from Chaplin and Keaton and Harold Lloyd and Douglas Fairbanks and a lot of the great silent movies was the ability to tell a story cinematically with film, visually. The Hulk, look at the beginning of the Hulk. There's no dialogue for the first 10 pages of my script of the Hulk. And when some of my producer friends, Steve Cannell, Stephen Bochco, close friends at Universal, when they read the script, I heard that they came to me later and said, we never thought this would work because there was no talk. I said, no, you do it on film. It's filmmaking, it's cinema. And when people saw that opening of the Incredible Hulk, with the affection established between him and his wife, with their arguing and their playfulness and their happiness and their love, and then it's destroyed in this awful accident where he cannot save her from the fires of the car, and then he wakes up, leaping up into that big close-up, and he's alone in his bed. And when people saw that the first time, including Stanley and everybody else at the studio, they realized, oh, this is not a comic book, this is cinema. And that's what I tried to adhere to, all the way through as we were doing the series. And what I've always tried to do when I'm making film is to use all of the elements of filmmaking to visualize it and to put it on the screen rather than just heads talking in a room.
Okay.
All right.
My last question, last, promise, last.
Okay, we'll see.
¿Cómo fue trabajar con Shaquille O'Neal en Still?
Yes, how was to work with Shaquille in Still?
Okay. When Warner's asked me to, Quincy Jones, just died last year. Quincy Jones, an old friend, asked me if I would do him a favor and help him to do this movie. They wanted to do a movie called Steel. I looked at the comic book. I said, okay, this sort of really takes place in the real world. He's not a superhero. He's just a black guy who makes a steel suit. It was Iron Man without Robert Downey Jr. and without $100 million.
Yeah.
And
The
I said,
stunt facilities, yes.
That's right. But I liked the idea that it was a black hero in that genre, which there had not yet been. And I said, yeah, I'd like to do that because I was born in Arkansas, which is I was raised in Washington, D.C., thank goodness, because in Arkansas, it was still two different countries. There were restrooms, bathrooms were men, women, and colored. There were always 3 restrooms at bus stations. I didn't understand it. So I was raised in a very bigoted anti-Semitic family. But for some reason, it never stuck, and I always tried to push it away as much as I could. And I love the idea of doing it with Shaq. So I said, they said, well, I said, who's going to star in this movie? And they said, well, we've got Shaquille O'Neal to play the lead. And I said, okay, who's going to star in this movie? He's not a star. I said, why do you put Arnold Schwarzenegger into Batman? You know, because you need Mr. Freeze to be there, because George Clooney not going to open the movie, you know? And they said, no, we don't want to spend the money. We think I said, no, it's a mistake. It's a mistake. It was frustrating. But Shaq was 24 years old. He had just signed the $250 million deal with the Lakers, Los Angeles basketball team. Yeah. And he was doing the Olympics. And I had like a month and a half to write this movie and get it made in a scramble before he, you know. And I kept begging them and Shaq was wonderful. From the first moment we met, he was right there, and he was 100% there. And he's not an actor. And I told him that, and you got to have it. You got to not only, I said, I think I can get the performance out of him. I sent one of my classmates from Carnegie in the drama department, who's also a director like me. I sent him to the Olympics with Shaq. And between games, Ben Martin, his name was, Ben was helping Shaq to go through all the scenes so that when he got to me on the set, I wasn't starting from scratch, you know. But Shaq was a wonderful guy. That was a couple of funny things. First of all, he's this much taller. You can't even get far enough back. He's a foot and a half taller than I am, 7'6", you know. But we'd be starting to shoot, and I'd say cut, and I'd go in and give him a note, you know. I'd say, Shaq, I think a little bit, and he wouldn't look at me. He'd be looking over my head. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. And I said, wait, I'm down here. You see my eyes here? Look, why can't you look in my eyes? And it was really interesting. He told me that growing up, his stepfather had been a drill sergeant. And the rule is you never look in the sergeant's eyes, because that's disrespect. You know, you have to look away from the, you know. And he said, so I'm always, and he said, and if I looked in his eyes, bam, he'd pop me. And I'd say, Shaq, let me assure you, I will not pop you. You know, not going to happen. And it took him a while longer to slowly get used to the fact that, and then another time he asked me, he was still a little bit tentative when we were working together. And I said, what's going on? He said, well, when are you going to start screaming? He said, directors scream all the time. I said, who have you worked with? Not me. I'm not a screamer, Shaq. Not going to happen, you know. And it took him another couple of months to get over that and realized, no, not going to be screaming, Shaq. And also, he was the most generous guy you could imagine. If there was a kid on the set, particularly a kid, Shaq would say, hello, how are you? My first assistant director, Vanita, brought her daughter, Bridget, who was 8 years old. Hi, Bridget. Shaq's going, hi, how are you, Bridget? Nice to see you. What's that in your hand, Bridget? And she was holding a little stuffed gecko, little lizard, you know. And he said, oh, you like geckos? And she said, yeah, I do. He said, oh, do you have any real ones? And she said, no, but that's, you know, Bridget, nice to see you. Good to see you. And an hour later, Bridget goes to Vanita and is saying, Mommy, come here. And she pulls Vanita over to Shaq's trailer. And she goes inside, they go inside, and there's a terrarium there with 2 geckos in it and a ribbon around it that says, for Bridget, you know. And that was, and after that, a lot of the crew would come up to him and say, Shaq, this is my little toy Ferrari. You know, can I? You know? So he was great. And when we'd break for lunch, he would go to the closest school and go in and talk to the kids and talk to them about being straight and staying off drugs and all that sort of stuff. He'd play basketball in the neighborhoods when we were shooting downtown, which we did a lot. And he was just a really genuine, sweet, loving guy who recognized that he was a role model, you know. And also, he had been raised by a woman. When you met Shaq's mother, you understood why Shaq was who he was, because his mother was 6'2", and she was also the salt of the earth. You know, she was no mess with mama, you know. And so he was a grandkid, and we're still friends. I haven't seen him in a long time now, but he's a good human being, and I was blessed to have the opportunity to work with him.
Bien.
All right.
La verdad
And
es que
P.S. The last thing is that the movie, as I predicted, did not open. You know, it got the week before our movie was to open. We had our premiere at Grauman's Chinese Theater, and that same weekend, Warner Brothers opened a movie called Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts at the peaks of their careers. They were expecting a $50 million opening weekend, and it made about 16 million. You know, it was like a bomb. And I thought, oh my God, they've got Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts, and I've got a wonderful, sweet basketball player. You know? And so that's what happened. The movie tested well at test audiences all across the country, 60 different theaters. And I said, yeah, but they're getting in for free, you know, and the movie didn't open, but I'm still proud of it because it was a sweet movie, and Shaq was great.
Okay.
bien.
Well, I hope I haven't talked your ears off too much, guys.
No, we are astonished of your how you share your own heart, your memories, your impersonations, your stories about the things that made part of us as human beings, but as the child that is still inside us, because everybody
Yeah.
has you start to die when your child inside you is forgotten.
Right.
And we have no words to thank you, your generosity, your time, your funny way of tell stories. You are really a storyteller, and you have us are super caught with the stories, and you prepare your plot twist, and then you punch without warning, and you are great. Thank you very
Oh, well,
much.
listen,
indeed.
it's been Emiliano, Pablo, Fernando. We've been chasing this for a year now, Fernando. And good, finally we are here, and I'm so happy to have been able to be here with you. And keep in touch and stay in touch with me, and let me know how all is going with you. And I'll be here. If you ever have any more questions, always feel free to write me and ask, and we'll talk some more, okay?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very great person, and besides, a great screenwriter and director, Mr. Kenneth Johnson. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You bet. Take care, guys.
Thank you very much indeed.